Hey all, Wild Philosophy here, and today we are going to be talking about The Borrowers. Now, The Borrowers was a children's novel. I'm going to call it written, I think in the 40s or 50s, by Mary Norton. It was very well known, at least it was to your parents. You might have seen the movies. There have been several film versions, the most notable of which for our generation, Gen Z, was Arrietty, the film that came out from Studio Ghibli in 2010. And Mrs. Norton was also known for writing Bedknobs and Broomsticks, the film about the children who go to live with a witch who's trying to stop the Nazis from invading England. The Borrowers is about a race of little people who live under our floorboards or behind the clock, and who survive by borrowing, in quotes, little things from us, to line their nest with and to eat. It's basically a very clever reinterpretation of the English tradition of fairies, or English and Irish, present throughout those islands. And as she addressed herself in the opening of the book, it's interesting because it's one of the very few children's novels I have read that can be described as a tragedy. It is no one dies in the novel, but it's nonetheless a very, very sad book, because the entire plot is driven by the main character's concern of her species going extinct. And her concern over being the last one of her species. At the start of the novel, we're introduced, Arrietty, the main character, is the sole child of her parents, Pod and Homily. She's never met another borrower in her life, and she doesn't even know if they exist. And then through the conversation with a boy, he suggests that maybe her species is going extinct. She begins to panic. We find out near the end that there's at least 3 other living borrowers, but we're not given any closure on this topic. And so the interesting portion of the book, the novel itself is amazing. Mary Norton was a wonderful writer. It actually took me about an hour to get through the 200-page novel, which is unusually fast. And it's such a good book that I am now reading the sequels, of which there are 4. But Mary, it's interesting. So, I know I mentioned last time that children are far more intelligent than we give them credit for, and I'm willing to stand by this, but one thing children do need help with, or do need to learn about, which adults, like children, they don't have as much self-control. Anyone who's worked with children, and I have a decent bit of experience here, knows that they're exceptionally curious, they're exceptionally smart, they can internalize information wonderfully, but they have no emotional control, and in particular, they cannot understand bad emotions. So trying to get a child to understand loss or grief is always fascinating, just to see someone do. It's just so hard, right? I don't know if most of you have any experience trying to teach a 4-year-old what death is, or especially not only your death, but the annihilation of your entire race and their civilization and all memory of them upon this good green earth. But it's difficult. Even for most adults struggle with grief, and yet Mrs. Norton does an immensely good job explaining or helping to portray, because she's not preachy, helping to portray what grief looks like to the reader, and to young readers in specific, to put ourselves in their shoes. Yeah, this means that The Borrowers is one of the more complex children's novels, and they ends up having to wrangle with a lot of questions, like one of the chief one being like, what is the borrower civilization? All they do is borrow or steal from other people. Even their names are just copies of like household objects or prayer books or spheres or whatnot. And they never make anything, which is perhaps a dig at our own society. And then, so what would it mean if they vanished? And what would it be like being, because Arrietty is would be the last of her species, what would it be like to be alone? I'm not going to reveal the answers the author gives to this question, because I think that this is the sort of thing you'd be better off to find out on your own rather than having me spoil. I will include a link to a publicly accessible version of this book on the National Emergency Library, which is associated with the Internet Archive, so that you can read it at your own time. Their edition of the book is only 117 pages. I highly recommend going through it. It's undoubtedly the best book I ever viewed thus far. The one thing I will reveal is that Mrs. Norton very much uses it as a defense of what we might call spirit. There's no real good English word for this one. The Greeks, in their philosophy, called it thumos. I guess the nearest English phrase would be the fire in the belly. That would be the best one if I could do it, but we might internalize it as a life, like a vitalistic force that enters and sustains you in your hour of need, because Arrietty does not give in, does not surrender, and does not keel over and die. Unlike her mother, I think her mother's sort of the foil to herself. Her mother's very much concerned with material acquisition. Her greed underwhelms the success of the family's safety and nearly causes all of their deaths. Spoiler. And this is contrasted with Arrietty's very adventurous personality. She very much has a fire in the belly, and it's her response to the question posed by the human boy that she meets, who asks about the death of her civilization, that makes the novel so interesting. So yeah, thank you for listening today. Hopefully we will have a second video up tonight, but we'll have to see, on the Nutcracker and the Mouse King. Keep safe.